Hi everyone, welcome to Leisrealtalk. Sorry for the delayed start. I was looking at some map. I want to show you a map. That would be an important part of today's discussion. All right, welcome. It's Thursday night or Friday morning. I hope everyone has had a great week so far. All right, what a subject tonight. Let's talk about a secret meeting that I've heard for over a week now. About a week ago, I saw a YouTuber who's also very active on X, Twitter, and he posted a note saying that a secret trilateral meeting between China, Russia, and North Korea will be held in China's northeast. And his post caught my attention because he didn't post it just once, but 3 times in 3 consecutive days, from the 6th to the 8th. And people challenged him, and I also find it hard to believe. But he is adamant about his source. Now, so that kept stay on the back of my mind. And then Russia's Vladimir Putin's meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un on September 13th at a Russian spaceport has been major headline news. And their meeting unnerves the West for concerns over North Koreans supplying weapons to the Russians, or potential supplying the weapons to the Russians. If the trilateral meeting was true, that would certainly complicate the matter, because then what makes the West nervous will be, I think, 3 times worse, right? So today we will get to the bottom of this issue in 3 steps. First, we'll talk about the possible trilateral partnership between China, Russia, and North Korea. Then we'll talk about the Putin-Kim meeting. And last but not least, based on the previous two segments, we'll assess if the rumor of this secret meeting was true. Okay, so first, let's talk about the trilateral meeting. The trilateral partnership, what it would mean to the 3 countries involved. So in the past couple of months, we've observed increasing interactions between China, Russia, and North Korea. At a recent military parade in North Korea to celebrate the 70th anniversary of ceasefire in the Korean War, Russia and China both sent a high-level delegation to attend the event. The event was in July. Wall Street Journal used this headline for its report on the July event. It says, Kim Jong-un flaunts North Korea's newest weapons with Russia and China by his side. And the subtitle said, Pyongyang typically used to exercise more restraint at military parades with Chinese and Russian officials present, but no more. So I think that Wall Street Journal headline, says something. Without a doubt, there are certainly signs of a trilateral partnership being formed. John Kirby, spokesman for the U.S. National Security Council, said that one of the aims of the Russian defense minister, his recent visit to North Korea, was to persuade Pyongyang to sell arms and ammunition to Russia. And the U.S. has urged North Korea not to supply or sell weapons to Russia. Kremlin spokesman rejected the U.S. warning about the arms deal, saying that the interests of Russia and North Korea were more important than Washington's warnings. The 3 leaders, if you look at the interest of Putin, Xi, and Kim, they share the same geopolitical expansionist ambitions, right? Putin seeks to conquer Ukraine and make it part of his Greater Russian Empire, Xi Jinping seeks to capture Taiwan and therefore achieve regional or global dominance by 2049 as part of the Great China Dream. And Kim Jong-un certainly wants to make the entire Korean Peninsula under his control. So in short, the three leaders shared similar territorial ambitions, but with different time frames in their mind, of course. So after a year and a half into war, Russia suffers from a serious shortage of weapons and ammunition. And Putin certainly hopes to get some help from North Korea. And North Korea, which has not fought a war since the ceasefire of the Korean War in 1953, happens to have a large amount of surplus of Soviet-style ammunition. So North Korea can take advantage of Putin's dire situation in the war to request Russian military technology and cheap oil, gas, and agricultural products. This is what Western media are talking about in the past couple of days when it comes to the bilateral meetings. But I think the significance of the bilateral meeting between Putin and Kim has gone far beyond Russia and North Korea. A hidden, crucial player in the Putin-Kim meeting is China's leader, Xi Jinping. Now, Xi Jinping and the CCP are interested in seeing the Russia-Ukraine war to be prolonged. So the US and Europe will be dragged into a war indefinitely. It will give the CCP time to prepare for a military operation against Taiwan. Beijing hopes that the Russian-Ukraine war will tie up US resources, and so the Americans won't be able to focus on the CCP and the Taiwan Strait security concerns. The CCP also isn't interested in seeing the Putin regime collapse or lose miserably in the war. So despite their differences and conflicts, Xi Jinping does need Putin on his side in his confrontation with the United States. So from Xi Jinping's perspective, he wants to support Putin to the extent that the war continues without a winner or a loser. It's the most ideal situation for him and the CCP. Given the way the war is going and the dire reality the Russian military faces, Xi Jinping feels compelled to support Putin militarily. But he knows that his regime will be strongly sanctioned by the West if it directly supports Russia. So he needs an intermediary, and thus Kim Jong-un becomes a good buddy. North Korea is the safest and the most suitable transit point between China and Russia. China will provide weapons and ammunition to North Korea, and North Korea will sell them to Russia. North Korea will bear the brunt of the sanctions. While Kim is more than happy to play the role of a middleman in this trilateral partnership, he has nothing to lose. His country is already one of the most severely sanctioned countries by the United States. And how much more can the US sanction them? By joining the partnership, Kim makes money by being the middleman. He can also bargain with China and Russia to access their technologies and cheap natural resources, such as Russian oil and food. Most importantly, Kim will carry more weight in geopolitics and gain leverage in negotiating with the United States. He may use the West's reluctance to expand the Russian-Ukraine war as a bargaining chip to boost himself on the international stage. And also, if the Chinese and the Russians don't take him seriously, he can turn to the United States. Now, Kim Jong-un once famously said that the conflict with the Americans is 100-year long, whereas the conflict with the Chinese is 1,000-year long, or is a 1,000-year conflict. That just shows you who he sees as his enemy or friends. And also, the three generations of the Kims including Kim's father and grandfather, are the most experienced heads of state, shall we say, who have finessed between the Russians and the Chinese for decades. And so Kim Jong-un certainly feels that he can handle the Chinese and the Russians in this deal. Now, I've talked about what this trilateral partnership means to the Chinese, to Xi Jinping, and also to Kim Jong-un. Now, for Putin, he has no choice but to rely on his two communist brothers for support. Without China in this deal backing Kim Jong-un, North Korea isn't as appealing to him because the country, after all, lacks economic and technological substance for a meaningful long-term partnership. But with China supplying the weapons and ammunition, it's a different story. This view is openly discussed among Chinese political observers. They see it right through the Kim-Putin meeting, and they see Xi Jinping's shadow there. And from their perspective, the CCP or China is the real substance behind the Russia-North Korea bilateral meetings. And I happen to share the same view. And this explanation, this trilateral partnership, explains the extraordinary enthusiasm Putin displayed for his meeting with Kim. Now let's talk about Kim Jong-un's trip to Russia. According to Korea's, I think it's Yonhap news agency, Putin arrived earlier to welcome Kim Jong-un. Putin arrived at about 12:30 p.m. on the 13th, and Kim arrived 30 minutes later. Putin greeted Kim with big smiles, and the two shook hands for as long as 40 seconds. Putin told Kim that he was very happy to see him and that he wanted to show him Russia's newly built space launch site. And Kim replied, "Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to invite us here." Now, you must know that Putin is known as the king of late arrival when meeting with other heads of state. He was 4 hours and 15 minutes late when meeting with former German Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2014. 2.5 hours late when meeting with former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2018. In 2016, he was 1 hour and 45 minutes late for a meeting with former South Korean President Park Geun-hye. And in 2019, he was nearly 2 hours late for a meeting with former South Korean President Moon Jae-in at the G20. And in 2018, he arrived 35 minutes later than scheduled for a meeting with former US President Donald Trump, who, by the way, also showed up late. Putin's tardiness is a trick he uses to gain a psychological advantage when meeting with opponents, but he doesn't use it always. For example, last July, when he went to the Iranian capital, Tehran, to meet with Turkey's president, he was only 44 seconds late. So his 30-minute early arrival this time shows you that how important this meeting was to him. It doesn't look like the US has many options beyond the standard practice of more sanctions to deal with this trilateral partnership. China, Russia, and North Korea all have nuclear weapons. Russia has proposed to hold joint military exercises with the other two countries. Whether this partnership evolves from a bilateral to a trilateral partnership is certainly a test to the Biden administration. Okay, so now let's talk about the secret meeting, because that's what, that's the driver for this discussion, right? Now, let me share my slides. My screen is frozen for some odd reason. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I can share the slides for some very, very strange Oh, here it is. Okay, I did share it. Okay. The person who released the information is a social media personality who has certainly access to CCP leadership, and it has in the past uh, been credited for some accurate disclosures of CCP politics. So he posted on September 6th that a secret China, Russia, North Korea meeting would be held in Harbin, the capital city of China's northernmost province, Heilongjiang. And he posted the same message on the 7th and the 8th. And here I show you the one from the 8th because it has the most information. So he said the three will be meeting on the Sun Island near Harbin. And on the 8th, he said, and then Putin and Kim will leave China the next morning, which is the 9th. Now, Xi Jinping hasn't visited Heilongjiang for 5 years. My computer is really slow. I don't know what happened. I can't go to the next page. I don't know why there's a freeze on my screen. Maybe let me close some windows. I don't know if that's why. Okay, here we go. So Xi Jinping hadn't visited Heilongjiang for 5 years. And Xinhua's press release said that he visited Heilongjiang from September 6th to the 8th. And I checked his itinerary and found out where he went in Heilongjiang. His first stop was the Mohe forest area. He went there to inspect natural forestry. He then went to the Arctic village, a village that's about 2 kilometers away from the forest, near the northernmost border with Russia. And he visited a family there and ate a meal with them in the village. And then the next day, that was the 6th. And then on the 7th, he visited one of the flooded area during the typhoon Dusuri. And because remember the typhoon went to the northeast and the Heilongjiang got flooded. And he also went to visit the Harbin Engineering University, which was formerly the Chinese PLA's military and engineering college. And the school was founded in 1953 and is a major higher education institute dedicated to naval and nuclear technology. And it is one of China's best engineering schools. And on the 8th, he met with his local officials for meetings. So there wasn't anything really pressing on his agenda. Given the number of fires that's burning in Beijing, from the crisis within the PLA, right? The missing defense minister, the two missing defense minister, and the rumors surrounding the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, Zhang Youxia, his second in command in the PLA. And also the crisis in the foreign ministry, because aside from Qin Gang, China's current foreign minister, Wang Yi, who reassumed his old role after Qin Gang disappeared, is also rumored to be staying at home to reflect on his mistake at the BRICS summit in South Africa. The incident was that Xi Jinping's interpreter was blocked by security and she walked down the red carpet alone. Remember that video? So Wang Yi is said he will go to Russia, and I think the Russians announced that they expect one later this month for a meeting, for a securities meeting, or for a foreign ministry meeting. But he missed the G20 Wang Yi missed G20. Wang Yi also missed. He will miss the UN meeting in New York. So rumor has it that he was ordered to stay at home and reflect on his mistake in South Africa. So on top of that, the crisis within the PLA and then the foreign ministry, China's economy, right? Even Joe Biden a few days ago made the comment that China is unlikely to invade Taiwan because Xi Jinping has his hands full with China's economic issues. So it seems that it's odd that Xi Jinping decided to go to Heilongjiang for a leisurely visit. Unless, of course, he was there to meet his Russian and North Korean buddies. So my computer, I want to share with you the map, and my computer just froze. I have no idea why that's the case. All right, so I'll just go to the map. Okay, so these two guys met on the 13th in a place called what is it called? I'm sorry, I forgot the name. It's in. I'll show you on the map. Right, it's further north along the border between China and Russia. It's where the satellite launch. It's the spaceport. And then, according to this news report, this journalist based in South Korea, Kim Jong-un left Pyongyang in the afternoon of September the 10th to head to. I mean, he rode in his bulletproof armored train to go to Russia. So he left in the afternoon of the 10th, and he arrived at the border of Russia on the 12th of September. And Putin, meanwhile, also showed up on the 12th in the city that's known as the Chinese city of Haishenwei, and in Russia it's called. Hold on, let me show you. My computer just froze. Let me make this bigger. It's called Vladivostok. In Chinese, we know that Haishenwei. So Putin showed up on the 12th in Vladivostok. Oh, sorry, I wish I could speak Russian. And so I highlighted the cities where these three men were between September 8th to the 13th. So Harbin is in the center. It's marked there. That's where they were rumored to have met. And then Putin traveled to the southeast to go to the east to go to Haishenwei or Vladivostok. And that's, I calculated, it's about less than 400 miles away. And then Kim traveled in his slowly moving train for 2 days and go to this Russian spaceport, and it's marked on the top. It's the top right red mark. And then Mohe City, the top left corner, is where Xi Jinping went on the 6th to visit the forest. And that's where he had the meal with the local villager. And that's a one-day trip for him. and he returned to Harbin the next day to visit the school, the engineering school. I just want to show you that the reason I marked that, it's that was a one-day trip for him, but he traveled a good, I think in this case, more than, because it's like more than double the time, um, right, that Putin had to travel. So I'm just trying to show you within a couple of days, the three leaders, the leaders of North Russia, not North Russia, what I'm saying, North Korea, Russia, and China were within a few hundred miles of each other, near the border of North Korea, Russia, and China. They're all in that area within, from September the 6th or the 8th to the 13th. So the question is, did they meet? Was it pure coincidence that they were all there, or they were actually there for a secret meeting, right? So then that comes to the question: how credible is this rumor? I can't say that I can verify this rumor is true, but it has stayed on my mind for a week. And the reason I chose to tell you about it is I cannot discredit this rumor. I think it carries a certain weight in geopolitics, and it's not easily dismissed. I cannot easily dismiss it to say, it's just a rumor. I tend not to believe it. Although I cannot confirm it, but I think it carries certain weight, in my opinion. So that's what I will leave you at. And I think this map says a lot, right? They all moved around in that area within a number of days. All right. Let me see if people have questions for me. I don't know why my computer moves so slowly. I hope this is not an issue for you guys. Let me see if people have any questions for me. I'll go through the super chats first. If you have questions for me, put my name in front so I know it's addressed to me. Okay. All right. From Boy Kochan China, love delay. Thank you. I love the roses. Thank you. All right, let me see. Thank you. Okay, that seems to be all. Okay, let me just pick a question. Jonathan Doe. America would know by satellite if China ships weapons to North Korea. So I would imagine Biden would put more tariffs on China. Seems a suicide act to me. Well, I think the United States certainly knows. But they choose, I think the Western media choose not to say anything. It seems to be a suicide act to you. By who? By Kim Jong-un, or by Xi Jinping, or by all of them? They may not look at it that way, because, like I said, their goal is to prolong this war. I mean, Xi Jinping's agenda is to prolong this war without generating a winner or loser. And the longer it drags on, the more advantageous it is to him. And because a war in a democratic society will eventually become controversial, right? Voters will tend to run out of patience to support their government in devoting their national resources to support a war that doesn't take place on their territory. So they understand that. And so they want to prolong this war in their own interest. So they don't see it as a suicidal act. So it's a test to the Biden administration. What are they going to do, right? Um, Boycott China. Like, is it true new PRC school books claim all the territory the Mongols ever visited as their own, calling it the Yuan dynasty? Yes, the new maps has claimed certain territory uh, that could be that's disputed between China, not only just China and Mongolia, but also China and Russia. So that's very interesting. But in the scheme of things, I think Putin uh, picks his battle. He does need Xi Jinping's support for his war, and so he probably chooses to ignore the territorial issues as the map illustrates. Michael A. Mayo, any thoughts on whether this may relate to Kissinger's suggestion that a secret multilateral commission should be formed to manage US China foreign policy? A secret multilateral commission will be formed to manage US foreign. Well, who, what do you, okay, I'm not familiar with his suggestion. Who will be in this multilateral commission? How would that to manage US China foreign policy? I think the multilateral commission would be just US China, right? I mean, are the United States and China be interested in having other countries involved in this secret commission to manage their relations? I don't think so. Unless unless you get parties like Russia and North Korea involved, but why would the United States be willing to that kind of idea? So I'm not sure what this. I'm not familiar with his idea of this secret multilateral commission, um, and how that would solve Sino-US, or how that would help Sino-US relations. All right, from Ptolomeo Salamanca. Lei, have you read any of the North Korean defector stories, such as In Order to Live, The Girl with Seven Names, and The Green Light to Freedom? All gave me great appreciation of everything I have. I have heard about their stories here and there. It's very sad. And yes, that certainly gave us the great appreciation for everything that we have. I feel the same way. Um, I share your view. Okay, let me see. Questions for me? Nick Furry. China wants to start a Fujian integration zone for Matsu and Kinmen Islands for Taiwanese to buy properties in mainland. Is that a trap bait? Yes, that is new. That happened this week, this Monday. And people say this is the first step of CCP's strategy to overtake Kinmen and Matsu Island. So the first, CCP's first step to take over Taiwan will start with Matsu and Kinmen Island, and the very first step to take over Matsu and Kinmen will be this. It's really a psychological war, to win over the Taiwanese on the island to say, hey, we're really one of the same, come over to Fujian and buy a home that your ancestor will appreciate. We share the same ancestry, and we're really one of the same, come over to the mainland. That kind of propaganda. But that propaganda is the first step for Matsu and Kinmen. All right. Let me see. Moonwalker, do you think China needs North Korea more or vice versa? Kim needs Xi's support, but China needs North Korea as a buffer and distraction from South Korea. I think China, they need each other. I think it's why I believe that the secret meeting really took place, because I mean, Putin and Xi, I think, needs Kim more than Kim needs the other two, because both Putin and Xi are in this internal political crisis, right? So they need to have some sort of external help, but they're also stuck in a situation that they can't help each other. And then so Xi Jinping needs Kim. I mean, Kim will, although Kim carries the least weight of the three, but he will be the most active player of the three. He will drive the show. And Xi Jinping wants to let Kim, drive the show. Um, and Kim really doesn't have anything to lose. He gains from all fronts. So that's what I think from their perspective, it does seem to make a lot of sense. And that's certain. I'm not saying that it makes sense from the American perspective, from the perspective of a democratic country, but it makes sense from an authoritarian dictator's perspective, from their game book, from how they would drive their playbooks. That seems to make a lot of sense. All right. From Sumiland, do you think Kim trusts Putin? Does Kim trust Xi? I think neither of them trust each other to the extent that Western leaders trust each other. I think these individuals, given their background, given their positions, cannot afford to trust anyone. So they don't really trust each other. But then, given their predicament, they have to trust each other to some extent. They're just using each other. That's the nature of their business. That's the nature of their politics. So when you say, do they trust each other? No, not from not in the sense of a Western type of trust, but they have their trust, right? All right, let's see. XPS. The question is, if the Great Firewall were to disappear, how would the CCP be removed? The people don't have weapons to combat the military. I fear that Tiananmen 2.0 would occur. You'll be surprised. Knowledge is power. The only reason, I hear this over and over again, the only reason so many Chinese are still brainwashed is because of the firewall, the censorship. If Chinese truly know what's happening in their country, they will demand changes. They will not be afraid to stand up and demand real changes in China, demand real political changes in China. It will be a different story. The only reason Tiananmen Square massacre happened, it was because of censorship. When the regime realizes that it has no control over the propaganda, when the regime loses control of the propaganda, it will be scared to open fire on its people because people will not forgive them. The only reason Tiananmen Square massacre took place, it was because the CCP or Deng Xiaoping and the regime at the time was able to successfully deceive the Chinese people that there was no death. Of course, people in Beijing knew that it happened, but the majority of Chinese who watched the CCP's television, who listened to the CCP's radio, believed what the government's propagandists told them. They believed that it was the students who were killing the soldiers, that the government had to reprimand these student troublemakers. That was the only reason that Tiananmen Square massacre could have happened. If there's no propaganda machine like that, I tell you, they wouldn't be able to open fire because they would be afraid. So I think the West has underestimated the role censorship has played. It's very dangerous, you know. Yeah. Because when the West plays with the fire of, using censorship against your political opponent, um, you run the risk of having the same fate as the CCP, because once people find out, you'll be overthrown. You will lose all credibility. So censorship is a double-edged sword. I mean, it has to be practiced to the extreme. Like, you have to shield all information. You have to you have to put out a complete lie that people knew nothing about the truth. Because once people find out that it was a lie, then you will have no credibility. Your people will have no trust in you. So it's very dangerous when politicians play with censorship. Um, that's my answer to the question. It's actually the question about the future of China. All right, let's see. Jeff Ramos, does China have any ally with Asian countries? Now even Vietnam is moving with the USA. Well, Cambodia, maybe. Vietnam, I think the United States and the West need to be. I have friends. I have Vietnamese friends, and they're wonderful people. I'm not saying this to oppose Vietnam as a country or to oppose Vietnamese people, but I do want to caution the West not to make the same mistake as they did when they rushed to to form a partnership with China, because Vietnam is still a communist state. Okay, don't make the same mistake. 30 years ago, when China claimed that they were opening up, I was told by my Vietnamese friend that the only reason the Vietnamese government didn't censor the internet, it was because they don't have the money. They don't have the money as the CCP does. If they had the money, they might do the same thing. So now that the West, Wall Street, and the United States government say, "Oh, the CCP," they finally want to run away from the CCP. Don't make the same mistake. Demand real political reforms in Vietnam. Help Vietnamese people, um, and really, when you say human rights, matter to you, and really demand real changes in people's human rights in these communist countries. Don't do it for money. Do it for values, and really uphold your standard. Because I see, people say, "Oh, maybe Vietnam is different." Maybe Vietnam is. It is, after all, still a communist country. I say this with full respect to Vietnamese people. Okay. All right. Question. Victor Shepherdson. It's been 4 weeks since the shadow bank Zhongzhi Enterprise failed coupon payment. Will they announce default? I wanted to make a video to say why the Chinese bank, people have been talking about the collapse of the Chinese economy for so many years, and yet it's still there, and why it hasn't really collapsed. We have not seen anything announced at the top, at the enterprise level or at the government level, about what they're going to do with the Zhongzhi enterprise group. You would expect a foreign government by now announce some kind of a policy or measurement or control in place to protect the consumers, right? We have not heard anything from the Chinese government. And that's typical, because they don't do anything. And yet, every day I see more protests breaking out across China. Policemen, teachers, random people who are protesting and over the non-payment. Some people claim that they haven't been paid for 6 months. Some people say they haven't been paid for a few months, and Government officials are told to cut 20, pay cut, to take a pay cut by 20% across the board. And even the zoos are losing the animals because they don't have zoos don't have the money to feed the animals in the zoos. I did a short video on a fake bear, and but that's the reality, because zoos are government. They're not private zoos; they're government affiliated, and they're not getting funding from the government to buy the food to feed the animals. So what are they going to do? Um, it's just very sad. So yeah, you don't hear anything from the government, from the organizations, and yet you see more and more people, consumers, ordinary people erupting here and there over um, money issues, financial issues, um, including banking issues. So, um, David Kwan, like, wouldn't it be easy for the West to get evidence of the weapons supplied to Russia as being from China? The question then becomes whether the West has the courage to sanction China. The Biden administration has certainly gathered so many evidence. It doesn't have evidence? Of course it does. But does it have the, like you said, does it have the courage to really sanction China? I think to some extent, I think the Biden administration is careful not to put too much pressure on Xi Jinping, because I think it's concerned that uh, when too much pressure is put on the regime, it may fall apart, and someone, like I said last time, someone can inadvertently hit the war button and then start something um, unnecessarily, right, in the Taiwan Strait. Because when people become irrational and when internal political struggles become out of control, and that could happen. So I think out of that concern, the U.S. government is also careful not to provoke the CCP unnecessarily. But standard is standard. Um, it's a question of, does the Biden administration know what button to push and what buttons not to push? Right? You certainly cannot push all the buttons, and you have to push some buttons, but they have to push the right buttons, and that's the question. Um, Voices on Espionage, but Lei, there are millions of Chinese living overseas. How could the true nature of the CCP not be well known already by mainland Chinese? It's clear the Chinese people are sheep. You'll be surprised how many Chinese are still living outside China, are still scared of the CCP. I was just talking to someone who is fully aware of CCP's atrocities, but she said, but she's so scared of even receiving information that has any negative connotations about the CCP via social media. Because she said, I still have mom and sister, I still have families living in China, and I may still have to visit them because my mom is old. I need to visit her. And I cannot, I cannot have anything. I cannot leave any evidence that I share this negative view on social media. I cannot leave any trace, because if I do, if I go back to China, they may cause me trouble. And if they don't cause me trouble, they may cause trouble to my family. That just shows you how much fear overseas Chinese still have. And that's a very, very serious situation. All right, let me see. I'll take a few more questions. For Nick Furry, the largest failed country garden project outside China is in Malaysia, with only 15% completed. It's a ghost city, literally. Yes, they were building this mega city so aggressively, but then the Malaysian government and the local community weren't too crazy about having a neighborhood, in their country that's primarily composed of foreigners, right? Because the project would be sold to foreign investors. And so yeah, the project was, I don't know how many units of property. It was gigantic. And so it was only it was like a ghost city. You're right, about 15%. And the people who bought the unit there probably felt left out. I mean, I'm not left out. I mean, they're locked into this community that's not even thriving. So, all right. Okay, I'll take one more question from let me see. I'll pick someone who hasn't asked me whose question I haven't answered. Let me see. Is there a question? From Mitsu, how can we make overseas Chinese here feel safe from the CCP? They're our citizens. Well, I think the US politicians should stop supporting local communities and local organizations that are affiliated with the Chinese consulates and embassies. Up until this year, the Lunar New Year celebration in Manhattan's Chinatown is still controlled by the Chinese embassies. And our politicians, like Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and New York's governor, and New York City mayor, they all went to this Chinatown's Lunar New Year celebration that's controlled by the CCP. That event discriminates other organizations, like from that Lunar New Year event is a event that discriminates other groups like the Tibetans, the Falun Gong. I don't know how many people from Taiwan are represented in that Lunar New Year celebration, and yet our politicians like Chuck Schumer goes to that event every year and says, hey, I support the Chinese community. Do you know which Chinese community you support? You're supporting the CCP communities here. It's so sad. And I don't know their legal aids, what they're doing. It's been so long, so many years. They don't know CCP's infiltration in New York. What that tells me is they really need to take a look at their their staff, their staff that cover the Chinese community. It's impossible not knowing that these events are controlled by the Chinese consulate. And so these are, I'm not talking, I'm talking about local community issues, but yet it's also national security issues. And I think American politicians are very ignorant for the past decade. And it's not like they aren't being reminded of CCP's infiltration, but are they really listening? Like, to what extent are they listening? So I hope I don't see Chuck Schumer next year go to that Chinatown Lunar New Year celebration again. We'll see what happens next year. Now that I've already mentioned his name, we'll see what happens next year. All right. All right, so that will be it. It's been more than 1 hour that I've been talking. That's all. Oh, I want to take a question from Sumiland, my moderator. Lei, you always think we don't have questions and have so many. Thank you, Lei. You are the best. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you, Sumiland, for getting everyone organized. You guys are the best. All right. Oh, I have a question from Michael Creighton. Lei interviewed a psychologist who said it takes several years for Chinese immigrants to overcome the war propaganda they learned from the CCP. Yes, it does take. I interviewed Dr. Yan, who's a psychiatrist and psychologist. He's also a certified MD, and he practiced Chinese medicine as well. he said it does take several years for people to get comfortable talking about politics. Um, and I recently interviewed Lily Tan, and the reason I interview her is not necessarily because her political view. I would interview someone who runs on a Democrat's ticket as well. But what I found her story amazing was her courage um, to run for to be involved in politics um, as a Chinese immigrant, because most Chinese immigrant would be scared of politics. I mean, it takes me a lot of courage to come to be talking about politics here, but to be actually involved in politics, to run for offices, I think it's just unthinkable. I mean, it's unthinkable for me. So I found her courage to be admirable. Um, Regardless which political party she's affiliated with. That's because we're all have been to some extent programmed in our head after living in China for so many years. Yes. So, Michael, thank you for bringing that up. All right. Thank you very much. And I'll see you this weekend. Okay. All right. Bye.